one of the most important original philosophical theologians, one of the greatest early intellectuals. He held a prophetic view based on the 1,260 days that the woman will be in the wilderness in Revelation 12:6, and he interpreted those days as the years that the true church would be oppressed by the papists, the popes. This is what Jonathan Edwards believed, and he considered that one of the most likely times for the end of the reign of Antichrist would be 1,260 years after AD 756, which was the acceding of temporal power of the popes, which would place, Steve, the arrival of the Antichrist potentially in 2012 with the end of his covenant with Israel, the midst of the week, the beginning of the real tribulation, the part where the trumpets and vial judgments are poured out in their severity, in the year 2016. And this list goes on and on. In 2012, we elect a new president. In 2012, the United Nations gets a new leader. In 2012, Petrus Romanus is likely going to materialize during a final conclave. 130 years after Jonathan Edwards, in 1878, Reverend William J. Reed did the same thing that Jonathan Edwards did to try to establish a date when the papal system would come to an end, and he set it for the year 2012. So what I'm telling you is there is something very strange that has been going on for thousands of years, and what interests me is why are all of these occultic forces in these disparate nations around the world and throughout time, why have they looked to the year 2012 as the arrival of the false prophet and the Antichrist, and then couple that with what is happening in biblical prophecy? Look at the Bible. Look at Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, Timothy, and look at the signs they give us. There are signs in nature: famine, earthquakes, plagues, signs in the heaven. And there's nobody that could deny right now that in the last decade we've had more of all of the above than in any other time in history. They also provided signs in society. They talked about lawlessness, violence, immorality, selfishness, hedonism, rebellion, despair. And look at your world today and tell me that this isn't happening. They talked about spiritual signs, apostasy in the professing church. They talked about political signs, with Arabs being hostile towards Israel and Russia being a menacing presence towards Israel. They talked about the reunification of Europe. They talked about a movement towards a one-world economy. They talked about technological signs, the genetics revolution. They talked about accelerating signs, population explosion, increases in knowledge. They talked about Israel regathering as a nation. So somebody tell me why, if you look at biblical prophecy, and then look at what these occultic forces have been doing, somebody tell me why it wouldn't be reasonable to believe that a game is afoot. And I'm telling you, we conclude that it is, and we provide information in Petrus Romanus, the final pope is here, that if you're not prayed up when you read this book, you better not read it.
Absolutely. Tom, I wanted to add something to what you said and kind of to feed off of what Steve was getting at before. Before, when I was talking about the prophecy of the popes in a couple of these, I think I misspoke. On John Paul, the phrase is from the labor of the sun, okay? Now, one thing that I looked at when I was investigating this prophecy is that I really, I wanted to prove it to myself one way or the other, whether there was anything to it. Was it really predicting the future? Now, in science, we learn about a thing called falsification. When you make a risky prediction, something that's so risky that it could falsify the whole thing. Now, that one that I mentioned before, religion depopulated. Now, you think about it. During that time period, the church could have experienced remarkable growth, or nothing at all could have happened. And, if that had happened, it would have falsified that prophecy. And that didn't happen. Instead, we saw the most devastation the church has ever experienced happened during those years. Okay, that's a major fulfillment. That was a risky prediction. Okay, this one about from the labor of the sun is really unusual because there's no way that you could even fake this. John Paul II was born during the eclipse of the sun. Okay, and then he ended up being buried during an eclipse of the sun. And I went to NASA's website and verified both of the eclipses. And there's just no way that they could set up the burial maybe, but there's no way they could set up his birth. So, those kind of things. Now, there's several of those kind of fulfillments in the prophecy, and you can read about those in the book. But I mean, those kind of things authenticated it to me, where I had to take it seriously and just couldn't just dismiss it.
Right. Well, you could take the last four popes, John Paul the Sixth, who reigned from the 1960s through the 1970s. And the prophecy of the popes describes him as Flos Florum, flower of flowers, which clearly matched John Paul the Sixth's heraldry. His coat of arms included three fleur-de-lis, the flower symbol used by the French monarchy. You could take the next pope, John Paul I. The prophecy of the popes described him as De Mediate Lunae, from the midst of the moon. And he's famous for the shortest papacy in history. He only lived 33 days as a pope. It's widely believed that he was poisoned, and we could go into that later if we want to. But as for his motto in the prophecy of the popes, John Paul I was born in the diocese of Beluna. Luna is Latin for the moon, and ascended to the papacy August 26, 1978, on the precise day of a half moon in its waning phase, which corresponds perfectly to his midst of the moon. John Paul II, which you just mentioned, and even Pope Benedict XVI. The prophecy of the popes described him as Gloria Olivae, the glory of the olive, and he was born on the feast of Saint Benedict. He took the name as Benedict, and the olive branch, of course, a symbol of the Benedictine monks, and that is seen as a very accurate fulfillment of the prophecy. And some also even connect that to the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24 and the end times. But, of course, it all still brings us back to the last entry in the prophecy of the popes and the final pope, Peter the Roman, and the statement once again that whether somebody buys into this or don't, I sure didn't in the beginning, you sure didn't in the beginning, but it really doesn't even have it. You know what? Let me let the audience know. The reason that we chose this prophecy really was only to launch a larger question, and that is the false prophet and the Antichrist in the world today? And that's where the real evidence in this book is going to shock some people. And when you look at the political maneuverings, earlier I was talking about the College of the Cardinals and Carlo Vagano and this whole thing about the Vatican leaks, but at a deeper level, beneath what the public is seeing right now in the Vatican, in the Vatican leaks scandal, Vagano's letters indicate that he was prematurely removed from the office of Secretary General of the government of the Vatican City State and given the job of nuncio, or the ambassador to the United States, specifically to remove him from Rome to the United States so that a power alignment could occur within the Vatican. Inside the Vatican government, supporters for Bertone could gather around him. I'm not the only one saying that. The best Vatican watchers are saying this. Most Vatican experts agree that the struggle that you're seeing right now in the media is the tiniest tip of a very large iceberg, where mostly unseen by the world, there is a deeper internal campaign right now that involves Machiavellian manipulation, maneuverings, what Reuters News called a sort of mutiny of the Monsignors, that is playing out behind the scenes between Secretary of State Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone, who may wind up being Petrus Romanus, and his supporters, versus rebels that have the tacit backing, by the way, not of Vagano, but of a former Secretary of State, Cardinal Angelo Sodano, who is an influential power broker in his own right, and a veteran diplomat who served under the late Pope John Paul II for 15 years. And Steve, Chris, and Bruce, this is where things get really intriguing, because if Sodano is truly behind these leaked papers that are coming out of the Secretariat of State in the Vatican, if he's behind the power struggle to undermine the papal possibilities for Cardinal Bertone, then something extraordinary really is happening with and between the original Fatima cover-up conspirators, Cardinal Ratzinger, who is now today known as Pope Benedict XVI, Cardinal Bertone, and Cardinal Sodano. And if you, I don't even know when we're going to take a break, but if you want to discuss what we could say about that, we can provide some eye-opening background on the Fatima year 2000 issue, in which all of these players who were involved then in what many Catholic priests then and now believe was central to paving the way for the coming of the Antichrist and his false prophet of end times biblical fame, Petrus Romanus, the last pope on the list. That's really what this book is about, and that's really the extraordinary conclusions that are made in this research that also happens to be connected to this 900-year-old Catholic prophecies and other prophecies that all seem to be coming to a cohesion in the year 2012. And extraordinarily, by the way, there's one thing that we have to talk about tonight, and this is the tour de force of the book. This is absolutely, in my opinion, one of the greatest things that I ever have had the privilege of publishing, and it was found by Chris Putnam, God's Bloodhound, and it has to do with a French codex written by a French Jesuit priest, mathematician, and code breaker by the name of René Thibault. And we have got to talk about that tonight and let Chris talk about this discovery and what it means to our book, because then you're getting it from the horse's mouth. You're getting it from a highly placed Jesuit priest who was an academic among the Roman hierarchy, and what he had to say about the coming of the final pope on this list illustrates very much what at least some in the among the Jesuit order, among the Black Pope, among the papacy, among the College of Cardinals of Curia, what some of them truly do believe about the prophecy of the popes, and therefore how it might affect the upcoming conclave to vote in the successor for Benedict XVI.
Hey, Tom, one of the other things I want you guys to address, and we're going to take a break in just a few minutes, and we've got, 3 hours still or close to it. So let's take a break. When we come back, I'd like you guys to address that because, Tom, here's the thing. Your book is laying out, you guys' mutual effort is laying out, look at the, these are my words, look at the headlines, look at all the documentation, look at everything we've discovered, and yet right now, okay, Christians will fight us on our trying to get their attention, but there's the whole world of the universal caliphate unfolding before their eyes, and Ahmadinejad really believes what he believes, and obviously the uproar in the world right now is you're going to see, just like Albert Pike, Giuseppe Mazzini's letter, the bottom line is you are seeing the world of Islam, the world of Christianity, and Judaism put into a war footing to destroy every one of those three groups to bring in Lucifer. It's written, it's stated, absolutely immoral dogmas. Albert Pike said, we worship Lucifer. And we're telling people that not only do the Masons claim that, the high-ranking ones, but now we've got basically the control of fighting or the vesting for control of the Vatican for Lucifer, and then you've got the whole world of Islam. It's amazing to me, and yet it's astonishing to me that people can't put that together.
Gentlemen, let's take a break.
Let's take a break.
Before we do, would each of you gentlemen please give out your contact information? And let me just say, for those just coming in, what a program tonight. We're talking about the final pope, Petrus Romanus. We've got Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, and Chris Putnam on.
You're listening to Omega Man Radio.
T-minus 10, 9, 8,